You're watching the Hostile Takeover podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Jacob from the Hostile Takeover podcast. Welcome to episode 1. I have a very special guest. I put a lot of thought into kind of who I wanted to have on first, and I thought Guillermo Subauste was just a fantastic first guest to have. Guillermo is a producer, an engineer, and a musician. He's also done a lot of show promoting, and he's just done live stuff. He's done studio work. So he's kind of all-encompassing, and I just really wanted to have a chat with him and highlight some of the things he's done in his career and give you a chance to kind of peek inside what it's like in the music industry. I first met Guillermo at this kind of weird show. It was like one of these like private events that a promotions company puts on. So I was hired on by the marketing company, and Guillermo was the tour manager and engineer for the Sadies, who were the performing act of the evening. And it just went a little sideways. The venue said they had a bunch of monitors, and they didn't have the number of monitors they said they had, and then the ones that they did have didn't work. So it was kind of in the middle of nowhere in Muskoka. So I kind of scrambled a little bit and pulled together some gear, and I brought it to Guillermo, and he got it up and running super quick, and the show went off, and it was great. It was the Sadies playing in this little tiny venue. It was super cool. But the whole time, like when shit went sideways, Guillermo was just super cool, and I really gained a lot of respect for him from just the way he handled himself. A lot of people just don't act like that when things kind of start going sideways. So it's really cool to work with somebody who's just such a true professional, but also just a wonderful human being and treats people with a lot of respect. So I'm not going to ramble on too much more. Please enjoy episode 1 with Guillermo Subauste. Hey man, how you doing?
Great, and you?
Good, man. It's really good to see you. It's been some time. I don't think I've seen you since before all the COVID stuff and everything.
It's probably been that long, yes. Thanks so much for inviting me here.
I'm very glad to have you as a first guest. All the things you do, like how you wear so many hats. You're like a musician, a producer, an engineer, and then you do like the live stuff too, as well as the studio stuff. So it's just you like kind of like all encompassing, and there's not too many people I know who do those things. So super excited to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah, it comes mostly just from getting bored doing one thing,
Yeah.
That's it, really.
Yeah. Was that something like you said, just getting bored, but like, was that something you kind of thought of when you were kind of pursuing all of these different ventures? Is that like, I have to wear a lot of hats if I'm going to be like keeping busy, or was it just something that kind of like came naturally to you?
It's more like it came naturally, because I started in music just by playing in a band when I was like 14 or 15, and then because the rest of the band was not very motivated to get things going, then I had to start organizing shows in order to get those going. So the whole promoting thing came from that. And marketing and like putting posters up in the street and all that stuff before the internet. And then when I finished high school, I only wanted to play. I had no interest in anything else. There was a little bit of a curiosity of the physics of how the voice is coming from the microphone and going into the monitors and the front of house, but that was it. But then when I finished high school, I went to a music school, and I didn't like just knowing music because I was playing punk. So music theory was a bit kind of like not that interesting. So I saw everyone around me and I was like, I don't want to do this. So I ended up in a audio engineering course and I loved it. All of a sudden, all the math and the stuff that I had hated it before made sense. But I only wanted to do studio work. I didn't want to do live sound. I was like almost anti live sound. Fast forward a couple of years later, because of the shows we were doing and the knowledge I had of audio, I found myself in a lot of shows that I was organizing where the audio was, it could have been better according to my opinion. So I started jumping behind the board and then doing more of that. I never had an interest for monitors and I still don't. I've had to do it a lot. But that's the one thing that never piqued interest and I did it and it just stayed like that. But for front of house, yeah, it's awesome because, you know, if you're a bit of a control freak and you like how things sound, then that's the ultimate control. You know, like you have a band playing on stage and then you decide what everyone in the audience is listening to. Obviously with input from the band and everything. That's why they hire you, because they like your input on that too. And then I started doing a lot of live sound and I didn't want to do studio again. But then I went to Banff, and then when I came to Toronto, I started working at Revolution and then it was like now I want to do only a studio after being 5 years on the road with Sadies and with other bands too. But I never wanted to produce. I was like, I saw what a producer would do in the studio, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not really interested in that. But then after seeing lots of producers come to the studio and work with the artist, I was like, oh, I think I have a better or faster way of doing this. Like I had opinions that I had to keep to myself because, you know, you're working for a big studio. So it's kind of like a hotel where you keep your opinions to yourself and the client is the client and they're doing their thing. But I was like, oh, maybe I can produce. You know, I did it with my own band. I didn't know I was producing, but if people are willing to hire me for giving my opinion on what they're doing more than just the technical part, then maybe I should do that. And then I started producing, and I play, you know, pretty basic other instruments like drums and bass, guitar, and all that stuff. I can't solo on any of them, but I do enough that it works. It's tasteful and the rhythm works. So then I started doing a lot of session playing for the things that I was producing. So I became a producer, and the whole live streaming thing happened when the pandemic started. And that one was at first more of a, I need to do something to make money. I was still doing lots of remote mixing, but there were no sessions at the studio. So, you know, the immigrant sort of survival, you know, gene or whatever you want to call it sort of kicked in. And it's like, okay, you have some cameras at the studio. I was already wanting to do a show, kind of like a tiny desk thing to do a podcast or something. This is how it sounds at the studio because it's always great. So I already had used OBS and other things. So I was like, why don't I just do this? And I remember one night thinking, I have to make the website for a company, and it can't be Pacha Sound or my name. It has to be something different because I don't want them to be connected. So I came up with the name Stream Tune Up and made that website that night, thinking like I have to do it right now or someone else is going to do it. So it's always been like a bit of a gut feeling and ending up in one position where you just have to keep going that way. And I've loved it, and it's kept me busy apart from the, you know, producing and mixing and mastering. So yeah, nothing was planned. I just knew that I wanted to be involved in music, and the curiosity and the being bored of just doing one thing is what's helped me do many of them, you know?
Yeah, I totally get it. You know, we have very different career paths. You know, I got into more like the production management side of things, and like logistics and all that. I just tended to, you know, I just gravitated to it and I enjoyed it. But, you know, coming up and everything, like I started out, you know, in a studio doing audio, and then I, you know, went to a theater where I was just kind of like a general tech, and then I got into like production management and stuff, and then I was like, I'm kind of bored of this, so I'll get into like artist management and booking shows, and then I went into uh, like live events, like we're outside of music, like big sporting event ceremonies and stuff. And then
Right.
I like opened up my own venue, and then I went back into production, and it's just like the interest thing, I kind of like to use all of my skills to do things, and
Hmm.
constantly build them. It's it helps out having all of these skills to be able to kind of just hop onto any project and be like, hey, I can do that, or like, or you can do like two things at once. It's a pretty great way to operate, and like I see that in you, and I have mad respect for it.
Well, thanks, man, and likewise. I mean, it's just nice to keep learning. And if something interests you, whatever it is, anything in that area is just going to be interesting, and it's never been tedious to want to know more about it.
Yeah.
And it comes also from just a stress of not wanting to be unprepared for something. I usually go to a session a lot earlier than I should, just because I don't want the stress of having to deal with problems last minute. Or same thing when I was on the road with Sadies. They weren't that organized when it came to the advancing of shows, and sometimes the venues weren't even like, or in South America, it's even less so, and in some places in Europe as well. But I would like try my best to see what board they had, just because if it was a board that I had never used, I could read the manual on my way there, because I don't want to get there and be like a deer in front of headlights, just 100%. Trying to. Yeah, I hate that. So, if I'm going to read the manual and it's not boring, I'm just looking for how to make aux sense and how to use the graphic cue. That's all. Once I have that, then I can figure out everything from there,
Yeah, advancing with venues and getting all that info and getting stuff prepared, it's both a blessing and a curse, because so sometimes you go in and everything's just perfect, like you can't believe everything's so easy, and then other times you go in and it's like, did you even read the first paragraph of the rider? Like, and so it's always something. It's like what's it going to be today?
Oh yeah, even if you've sent the most updated version, something always breaks between management and the booking agent and the venue and the tech at the venue, and something breaks and they're upset because you didn't send the most updated one, and you're upset because you sent it to everyone and no one got it.
Yeah, I've seen
weird.
Just like talking to people. I've never done this myself, but I've heard stories of people who just they'll like put like a pack of socks on the rider. Just to see if people read it, Plus, it's always nice to have clean socks on tour.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to talk to you again. Something that I just think super interesting about you is you were born in Peru,
yes.
And you moved to Canada, and then you moved back to Peru for a stint, and then back to Canada again.
Yeah, that's correct.
And the whole time you were like involved in the arts. And music, and I just wanted to ask, like, not what the differences are between Peru and Canada, but maybe some of like the philosophies that you've brought from one place to another, where like, we were doing something here and you brought it back there, or you brought something from there to here.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. There is a lot of stuff that's similar. But also a lot of stuff that's very different. One of the reasons why I left is because the industry there, even though the country is it's a tiny bit smaller than Ontario, but it has the same population than Canada, right? With Lima being the main city, the capital, which is where I'm from, where 10 million people live, or a bit 11, I think it's now. So a third of the whole country, which is the size of Ontario, lives in one city. So it was great. Like, there's a lot of stuff to do, but it got to the point where I felt like if I was like maybe in my early 20s, and I realized that if I stayed there for another like 20 or 30 years, not much was going to change. We were maybe going to tour either with my band or with other bands, some other places in South America, maybe something in Europe, but it wasn't really going to be something that could be worldwide or in a bigger market, So that was one of the reasons why I was always looking at another place to go and sort of not start again, but sort of try from scratch almost, and see what would happen and what the limit or what the possibilities were in that other place. And also the other reason is because nothing is ever on time in Peru. Like even with friends or family, and even more so with shows, which was nuts. You would say, doors at 7, first band at 8 and whatnot. And the show would probably be starting at 9:30 or 10. And bands will be arriving at different times and they want to play. Like it's completely disorganized. And obviously it depending on the production. Now there's a lot of really professional productions that work amazing, but you're still depending on the sound company bringing the gear on time, and people arriving, and like something's always missing. And if you go to places outside of Lima, I've been all over Peru on tour, and sometimes you get to places where there's just no standards for grounding electricity, so you get to a place where you're connecting an insert in the back of a board and you get shocked by like a lot of voltage, and you're like, okay, so that's going through the whole system, and someone could die, but it's just like, let's just get it done, like we have to get it done, and this is how it is, and you can either complain or make it happen, but you're not going to convince a whole culture of how things work that this is how we have to do it now. It just wouldn't happen. It takes years to change that, and it's changed in some industries, like not industry, but in some scenes, like with shows coming from outside and everything, but it's still very empirical in that sense. So that's something that's bad there, but at the same time it gives you these sort of like resourceful, kind of like MacGyver,
absolutely,
don't freeze, things are not working, but use some duct tape and do this, and like different solutions that make the show keep going, that have been incredibly useful here. And so and then from here, like after I went to Banff, which is how I first came to Canada, I learned a lot there, enough that when I went back to Peru,
and you were at the Banff Center for the Performing Arts?
Yeah, I was there. I got a scholarship to go there for the audio program for 3 months, and then I got accepted again for another 3 months, and then I got hired to do sound for the theater department. So I ended up staying a total of 2 years, and that's where I started doing a lot of live sound as well. And then when I went back to Peru, I went to see a friend who had been in a band with me before. Now he was in a band that was huge there, like doing shows for 80, 100,000 people. And I went to sound check just to check them, see how things go. And their sound check lasted like 3 hours. Everyone was sort of like just fucking around on stage and not really doing anything. And I was so like horrified because of, and it didn't sound good at the end, I was like, we could have done this in 45 minutes. You have a drum tech, you have a guitar, you have all these people, and it's just not working out. So I talked to him and I said, I think that I can make this work, So they hired me as a front of house, and I said, but let me pick my people as well. I'm going to pick a monitor engineer. I'm going to pick a stage manager, and like all the people I needed to make sure that it worked out, and we got it going, and it was amazing. So if I hadn't been to Canada, it would have been maybe sort of effective, but it would have never had this learned experience of seeing how a venue that receives acts every single night works. Yeah.
It's funny you mention I guess people's just sense of urgency in some places. I've been to some countries, and just the way of doing things is just so much slower than doing shows here in Canada, and specifically like Toronto is just fast. Everything's like now fast. We need it now. We need this piece of gear. Send someone to go grab it. It's 20 minutes down the road. But when you get up into like smaller markets and stuff, the people just are a little bit slower, like in a more rural area. So
Oh,
it's
totally.
interesting to like deal with all of those different personalities when you're on the road, right? You almost have to be like, I don't know. I just find people who kind of go on the road and kind of experience all sorts of different like lifestyles. There is just, it makes for a better show person because you're kind of level-headed. And you can expect anything from anyone.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I remember when I joined the Honey Runners, the guitar player we had once called me, because he knew that I was always kind of not pessimistic, but I was always sort of waiting for something bad to happen almost,
Yeah.
And he called me once saying like, hey, like 15 minutes before sound check or something, saying like, hey, we had a tire issue on the highway, we're waiting for whatever. And I was like, okay, don't worry, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And he was like, oh, I'm just kidding. We're outside. I was just trying to freak you out, but it didn't work. It didn't work out, And it's like, well, part of the advantage, I guess, in that sense of being pessimistic is that you're sort of evaluating everything that could go wrong and have a bit of a plan B and C and D in case things don't work, just so that you're prepared for them, And the same kind of analogy between Peru and Canada could be made for working in a studio versus working live, where in the studio also things are slower, people are okay waiting 45 minutes for a drum kit to be mic'd, and in my head it's just crazy, I there's no reason why someone should wait that long. So the advantage of doing both front of house and studio has been that then when people come to my studio or when I'm doing a session at Revolution or anywhere, I'm just like, I move things around and try to get the best sounds and everything, but you already kind of have an idea, and a millimeter is really not gonna have that much change on the final product if it means that the band is now ready to go and we're ready to do takes, and if something doesn't go wrong, then let's just keep moving, rather than waiting an hour to see if we can get that mic pre to stop being noisy. It's like, no, just use the next one over. It's not exactly the same, but it'll be fine, we'll survive.
I think and this goes for when you're working on anything that you kind of have to hyper focus on. You kind of get a tunnel vision on things, and I find a lot of times if I just step back from it for a second and then come back to it, it's like, oh, that's pretty good. But like when you're in there working and it's like, it's not good, it's the worst, like I gotta fix it. And like I've done it 100 times. Like I've been podcasting for a while, and like that's really the only time I get to do audio and like video stuff, and hands-on tech stuff. But so like when I'm doing something, I'll just hyper focus and like tweak it for like hours, and it's like 4 a.m. and I'm like, fuck. And then I look at it the next day, I'm like, hey, that's pretty fucking decent. So like, it's like knowing when something's good is, and like you can move past it is like a skill to have,
Yeah, definitely. And once you get to that point, that's the part where it's easier to be a producer as well, because now you're seeing all these different musicians sort of getting on their own hyper focuses.
Mm-hmm.
And because you've been there, or focus I don't know. And because you've been there, you can sort of guide them out of it and get the best performance from it. It's all sort of connected in a way.
Now, I guess, do you have you ever worked like solely as a producer, and you've had like an engineer working, or is it usually like producing and engineering?
It's always producing and engineering. Yeah. Yeah, maybe the only times have been when I've gone to like, no, but even then, because I have an assistant. If I go to Revolution or to Union or to a bigger studio, there's an assistant. And definitely I'm not too controlled. Like I get them to connect things, but I'm not going to triple check their work. They know that I know that we're going to do a line check at some point, and I'm going to move the microphones where I want them. So yeah, there's always both on the recording process. I have been in many situations where I've produced something that someone else is mixing, and even more so in projects that I've produced and mixed, but then someone else masters. That's probably what happens most of the time. I would say, yeah, 50% of the time I produce, mix, and someone else's masters. 40% of the time I produce and mix and master, and 10% of the time I produce and record, and then someone else mixes and someone else masters. I would say that's how it's divided on that.
Cool. And like what I wanted to chat to you about too was because like I met you not through like the indie music scene. Like I've met a lot of other people and where we've kind of interacted as well, but I met you like in like a professional environment where we were both hired by touring musicians to do a job. So like kind of like like I've been like an indie promoter and venue owner, and I've also worked, you know, giant shows with giant budgets and tours with giant budgets. How do you navigate going from, you know, different budget scales and like different like I don't want to say like levels of artists, because like an artist is an artist, but you know, how do you navigate that?
I don't. I mean, I think it's when it comes to live sound, especially. There are some shows that it's just not going to work out ever, and those are definitely not enjoyable. You know, I would say this. The second show I had with them was, I think the first one was Peterborough's Rib Fest, and the second one was a wedding in a gymnasium that they were playing for a fan that had hired them to play, and it just sounded terrible, and I felt bad after the show.
Gymnasiums are just a tough room, period. No matter what the system is or gear.
For a band with loud drums and a double bass through an 8x10 and 2 guitar amps that are louder than anything you've ever experienced, and they don't want to bring the amps down, so it was not good. It sounded terrible. But there's a lot of small shows that can also sound great if the band is a bit quieter, you know. I don't care using a couple of, you know, like small Yorkville monitors or something like that to make it sound great, you know. So I'm not picky. It's kind of the same in the studio. The only thing that can sometimes be demoralizing a little bit is you know, when maybe the artist is not that prepared and you have to sort of send them back home to rehearse or work a bit more on the songs and then come back.
Yeah.
That part can be a bit not too great, but if it's just something that's the songwriting or the proficiency or something, I'm not a snob, you know. I'm because I'm not also the best player on anything, you know. I've played drums with Misha Bergosman, with all these artists that have been doing this for longer than I've been alive, and I felt so humble and like I was in the wrong place, but it worked out. And then I've been in other projects where I was the most experienced one, and because of that, you know, this sort of keeps you humble, but also it brings your A game to the things that are starting out, you know. And we all get old eventually, so you know, newer generations, like I'm very like not even patient, because it's not something that you have to sort of endure, you know, but it's more like you just want to teach, and when someone has the you realize that they have that spark that they want to keep things going. I'm totally cool, you know, doing sound in a garage or an arena, you know. And I actually prefer venues, like smaller venues, and like 500,000 cap. I find those to be kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah,
arenas are
I agree.
Sound thing, you know?
Big, the sound's bouncing everywhere, and it also depends like on what kind of show it is. I find, you know, because like, you know, you go to like a big performing arts center that was designed for acoustic sound, and you see like a, you know, an orchestra that's like, it's really something, and you can see some more like, I guess like subdued shows there. Like I've seen Blue Rodeo, for instance. I've seen them in some like bigger venues, like 2,000 seaters, and they sound amazing, and they also like isolate all their amps and everything.
That helps a lot with the
But
mix for
yeah,
sure.
but they're it sounds great, but you get a like a heavy rock band in there, with loud amps, and it just sounds like garbage. But like a nice tight room, for a loud show, it's great. I love it. I've always been a fan of smaller venues myself.
Yeah, definitely. And like it's easier. It's so for example, the Sadies are a very loud band,
Yes.
but it's also very directional, right? So when we were doing shows in arenas or places like that, you have the stacks of amps for the guitars, and it's going to be loud for like the first 100 rows, but only in like that one spot. As soon as you step 2 seats to the right or the left, then it's not loud anymore. So you can't put that much guitars on a big PA. So it's going to sound great. It's going to sound awful. It's going to sound like there's so many things that are just out of your control.
Yeah.
While if you're doing a smaller venue, all I had to do was just pan Travis's guitar to the right, and so the opposite side, and Dallas's guitar to the other side, and all of a sudden the whole room was filled, and it sounded great. But when I'm working with like Dan Mangan or Sarah Harmer, which are like super quiet artists, it's easy. Like it can work either on smaller venues or big venues, because the stage is quiet. It's almost like mixing in the studio,
Mm-hmm.
And the monitors are quieter as well. But then Dwayne Gretzky, for example, is a band that is not necessarily loud on stage.
They have a lot going on,
but there's so many people.
Yeah.
There's so many people, that you have. I was just mixing some of the New Year's Eve show they had.
We watched that. We had a house party here, and we watched.
I didn't mix the live stream for that one. I just got the multi-track, and I'm working on a mix and post for it. But I was changing diapers for New Year's Eve, so I wasn't able to make it to that show. But they sent me the multi-track, and I was mixing it, and like the amount of bleed from, especially in a venue like History, like the amount of bleed from all the vocal microphones receiving like one's closer to the percussion, and another one's closer to the guitar, and another one's and they're moving around, so it's not something that you can just change the phase or something, and then all of a sudden everything sounds cohesive,
Is that where you recorded it? Was that History?
That's where when the show happened.
Okay.
Yes.
I haven't been to History yet, and I was wondering where they were recording it. I couldn't pinpoint it.
Right. It was there. But whenever we've done it at their own rehearsal space, it's a bit easier, and they're all
we have it
as
dialed
well,
in,
which
right?
helps,
Like there.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it can be challenging sometimes.
Something else I wanted to ask you about was because you do live and studio stuff. There's like a limitation for a live show, right? You can kind of put out what you have there, what instrumentation you have there. Like you can use tracks and everything, and kind of fill out some stuff. But do you think that when artists are in the studio, do you think they should record, something maybe a bit more grandiose on an album, and maybe not be able to capture that live? Or is like, do you think they should record what they can perform live?
I think it depends on the band and what they want to do, and the genre they're in as well, if it's a rock band or like anything that's not exclusively pop, I've always been of the idea personally of do whatever's in your mind to make that happen, like you're thinking of horns for this song and you want like a choir of people singing and you want all these things, and do it, because that album is going to last forever, and this is what you were hearing in your head, and those are the ideas you had, so just go for it. obviously you can't tour with 100 people, so you can use tracks, and if the band is happy with that, and they have a system going, I have nothing against it. But also they could just do a version of it that it's back to just a rock band, and sure, there's going to be a lot of arrangements and things that are missing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is worse or better. It's just different. Is it like Bob Dylan plays different versions of the songs on everything, so yeah, I don't see it. I don't think necessarily that an artist should limit themselves to what they're doing in the studio just because they're not going to be able to recreate it live. If there's something they really want, then just go for it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking. Well, I was thinking about the questions. That was something I really wanted to ask you because, I find like I listen to a lot of like, I guess you'd call it like traditional music, like rock and country and stuff like that, and like I just find like a lot of them aren't as experimental in the studio as I think they could be. And I think that's like a limitation they have due just to the fandom of a lot of those genres. But I appreciate your input on that because it's something I've been kind of wanted to,
like I said,
figure out.
It really depends. It really depends on who's producing, how much budget there is as well, because sometimes you only have time and money to be at the studio for a couple of days, so then you just record what you have, but for example, in my band's case, in the Honey Runners, before, when it was more of a rock quartet, even in the writing process of the band, there was a lot of like, but that's not what Honey Runners do, and I'm like, what do we do, like why can't we, like, if this is a song that came out, then why can't you just work on that song? And maybe this song doesn't have an electric guitar, but it has just this other instrument, or so that's sort of the direction I took with that project. And as much as I can, I try to let the artists I work with know that, it's like, don't just encapsulate yourself or on a specific label and then just do whatever that label is telling you to do. But just do whatever feels right. You see it in bands from like, Arcade Fire doing their disco album. It's like, you already did that other thing, so why not do this other thing that you enjoy, But yes, as you're saying, if it's a metal band or a rock band, there's always but our fans, are not going to be accepting us of this and whatnot. But who cares, just do it.
I agree. I think that's the right way to go too. And you're like, at the end of the day, like if you're doing something, and you're not putting what you really truly feel out there, like you're there's going to be a hole somewhere in that creative part of you, I think.
Definitely. At that point, it's just a job, and
yeah.
And most people that are making music are not doing it to make money necessarily. Like that's not why they started, because there's so many other things you could do that are way faster and you have a better chance of making money than music. So you must have started
truer words have been said.
From love. Yeah. So why not just kind of stay as true as you can to that,
It's cool. So I think what I wanted kind of on all of these episodes, I want to kind of get your thoughts on where the industry is now, and kind of what you're working on to kind of like change it a little bit, or what you think the industry is going to go to in the future. Let's start with just as like as a musician, where what's like the biggest hold up, like, and roadblock for people, and what can we do to curb that going forward?
I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen, or like anyone that has an actual like full answer of like, this is what's going on, most likely don't or doesn't, and the opposite thing is going to happen. However, if I had to hypothesize, it's kind of daunting out there because when I started in like the early 2000s or late 90s in Peru, even with piracy and everything, you were able to, have shows and sell albums and make good money from that. Like you would just do a show a week kind of thing. So like 50 something shows a year, sometimes more, even maybe 100. And the amount of albums that you would sell from that and the stores was enough in my case to put me through my career. Like when I was studying, I paid for that stuff with money that I made from selling CDs. You can't do that now. Like with streaming and everything, it's just not a possibility unless you're really successful, and that really successful is such a small thing of the pyramid that you're going to have a lot of different artists that are great and they're making great music, but even going on the road is not necessarily going to make them break even, So, and festivals are closing. Like, I don't know, it's just terrible. But we're fortunately in a country that, at least so far, does have a government that is supportive of the arts, and like in Peru, you would have never heard of the government giving you money to make a music video. I think that they cut here a while ago, but
you can get money. In Peru? Is that a thing at all? Is there like any government funding for arts, or is like
no? There's zero.
Wow,
zero. But here, there's grants if you want to go outside of Canada because you're promoting Canadian content, and you want to do a record. Here's $15,000 or $20,000 to make a record. You want to do a demo? Here's $3,000. Like that would be just completely. That's completely unheard of in Peru. There's no programs like that, which is both a blessing and a curse, I would say, because then the people that end up doing it, it's almost like they want it even more in a way. Like that's the part where I don't want to offend either side, because I have benefited from it, not so much from my own band because we rarely get any grants at all. But I've recorded a lot of artists that were able to pay me because they got grants, so I have personally benefited from the grant system for sure. And I'm totally cool with people that get it. I don't have anything against it, but a part of me, a more cynic part of me, wonders if if the necessity, if the lack of like desperation sometimes can hurt the passion of a project. It becomes. I've met people, maybe more so in the classical world or the jazz world, that they're just in a grant cycle where they're able to have a whole career where it's like you have something going, you got the first grant, so it's easier to get the next ones, and
you're in the club. Like once you get that like level 1
you're in the grant, club, and then it's what you're putting out good necessarily, or like it's taking something away from someone that's doing something better. Like I don't know, it's sort of like it can be tricky.
I've never thought about it that way before, and that's very, very interesting. The I guess necessity of, and the motivating factor of like not having money and like trying to make stuff work just for the pure passion of it. It's kind of like macabre in a way, but
for sure.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's through history, the most interesting art has usually come from, times of like war or like where things were really bad, so
or just some like weird obscure offshoot somewhere, it's like
totally
so strange how like it comes up and then it just becomes pop culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm kind of worried about it, but at the same time, I know that it's gonna sort itself out one way or another, and people are gonna keep creating. I'm not scared of AI. I'm not scared of like, if any of these things are happening, because at the end of the day, people are still gonna want to go to shows and watch a band play. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe it's tipping. I don't know. Like something's gonna happen at some point, but recorded music is gonna keep being a thing. Maybe budgets are gonna be smaller. And sorry, this is not completely related, but it's one of my thoughts from the very beginning. I've worked, in studios with lots of analog gear and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In my brain, through my career, especially in studio, I've always been one of not getting myself in debt for anything. Like when I started playing guitar, I started with the cheapest guitar I could afford. And when I started my studio, I didn't buy like an LA2 and things I could bring clients. I was like, this is the 2-channel interface that I have, but I can get good sounds, and I'm going to start working with the clients that I can work, and even to this day,
I think that's a great point. And I think it's very connected, because going forward in the industry, you're a up and coming band or whatever, you got to use what you have at your disposal to put stuff out there. Like me, like I would love to have, a better mic, but I'm just putting this out there with what I had. I bought this years ago for something else, and now I'm like, all right, let's use this to do this thing. It's free.
Yes. So I guess just like plan it a bit more like smartly, if that's even a word, in a smarter way. Don't live beyond your means in that sense, like just because, and this is more for engineers in this case, but it could also be for musicians, just because so-and-so artist has, this $6,000 Gretsch guitar, vintage guitar, and you don't, doesn't necessarily mean that your music can't be as good. And for a studio, same thing. Just because you don't have the most expensive microphone or, a $5,000 preamp and a $4,000 compressor, you can do it with the stock plugins. You can do it with a Focusrite $200 interface and crappy computer. Like,
for sure,
records have been made with less than that. Great sounding records have been made with less than that. So if you're able to make it happen with that, then once you get to a higher level and you have more tools and whatnot, then it's just going to keep sounding great. Just for newer engineers, I can put them on a studio with all the different tools. They could still make a really crappy sounding record just because they have the best on everything on the channel, on the chain of that channel. Doesn't mean that it's going to sound good. You need the experience as well, and that experience is earned through trial and error.
That's a really good point, and that's just solid advice for any venture. Really, is don't go into debt to do something that's risky. It's just a bad business decision.
Totally. It's so tempting. Because bands do tend to gravitate. It's like, oh yeah, but this studio has that big board and all these like different tools and everything. So it's true. Like buttons sell and all that stuff, and it takes longer to be able to convince bands that using less could work in their favor. With Sadies, for example, I had this thing where I had to convince them that if we recorded to Pro Tools instead of tape after like 19 records I had done working exclusively on tape, part of my process was that I wanted to be able to have more time for editing and playlisting and like things that I've used for my own recordings. But in their case, it's like, no, but we want to do it this way. But I knew that they were perfectionists as well. So I'm like, you're going to be able to be more of a perfectionist if we do it to digital instead of tape, So I ended up going to Revolution and recording myself playing drums directly to tape and also to Pro Tools at the same time. And then run the session from Pro Tools back to tape at the end. And I did a comp of a track where I was switching between the signal that was recorded directly to tape and the signal that was recorded to Pro Tools and then tape. And no one could tell which one was which. So it was like, okay, so let's record to Pro Tools. Once we're done with all the edits and all the stuff that we want and the comp in, then let's just dump it to tape if you want that sound, But or this record I did with Kike Escamilla, also he like wanted like this Neve pre and this other thing, and I'm like, this I have Universal Audio stuff, and it's not as the Focusrite that's a bit cleaner but without much character. Like, you can get good characters from these tools. So I was like, just, I know there's not all that stuff here, but we're gonna be able to make something that you're gonna love, and that record we did with Kike ended up being one of the it's much like it's a lot better sounding than the previous one he did, and he was like super happy with the whole process and everything. So again, it's not about the tools, it's just how you use them, and yeah, start small.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Like, what was it? Like, if you listen to like what Feist's first album, I think she recorded it in Toronto, and you can literally hear Toronto in the recordings. And who's like back Blind Melon, I think they were off their first album. I think he recorded one of the tracks on his answering machine. I think
Wow.
I think the track "Life Ain't So Shitty" was recorded on an answering machine.
Crazy.
And it sounds great. There's a little like hissy and fuzziness in it, but like whatever. That's part of the character of the song now, right? It's just It's what it is. You can put stuff out there, and yeah. I think, but people like the DIY mentality is like always been a huge thing, and like I feel like a lot of like the like the things that have busted out, like the grunge scene and like the punk rock scenes and stuff, like all of those started like from DIY initiatives, and like those things that like blew up and became pop culture were all like started from the DIY initiative, and like that's where the passion is, where it's like where like people do it out of necessity, like you say.
Yeah, I don't know how many grants. I'm sure that there's grants for punk as well, but I'm sure that whoever's starting in that kind of mentality is not thinking about that necessarily. As like, this is what we're gonna do, basically. But yeah, I think I'm hopeful for the future. I'm not worried about it. I think I don't have the answer as to like what's going to happen or how it's going to get fixed necessarily, but I just keep doing my thing and adapt to what's coming, basically.
Yeah, I think like like it's always like slowly and painfully evolving, but I think people are starting to wake up to like not only like problems in like the music industry, but just like commerce as a whole. I think people are, collectively coming together and saying like kind of like fuck you, you're seeing it in grocery stores, you're seeing it with music, you're seeing it with like live ticket sales and like the reselling, and you're just seeing it all over the place. And I really think that like the consumers are waking up to it, and
definitely.
I feel artists are too, and I feel like kind of like music has such a huge role in like paving the way for like the way people just even like think and act in society. I think music will probably lead the way in a lot of these like way we're doing commerce.
Yeah, definitely. But we sort of dropped the ball a little bit with the whole streaming thing and labels being in control of that and all that. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's starting to swing the other way. It can't just stay one way because it's just not sustainable, So yes, as you said, I think it's more of a grassroots thing where, maybe there's going to be like Tidal sort of started like that and sort of going to go that way, was it Universal?
Sorry, I'm not familiar with Tidal.
Well, Tidal, I mean, I think it was Kanye West that started it, I forget. But it came as a response originally to a Spotify, where you would have a better quality audio.
Okay.
You could get hi-fi, not MP3s at 128 kilobits per second, but you could get WAV files, or you could get like master files, basically. And they had the same amount of money per month that people subscribing would have to pay, but they were paying a better percentage to the artist and all that, so a lot of different.
I don't know. Is that, did they make money? Like, is that sustainable? Because I think if they're paying more to the artist, which is like, that should be like the first step in any streaming service that's coming out, I think.
Mhm.
Like if you're not making that better, just, you can fuck right off, in my opinion. But the second thing though is if they're doing the higher audio files and better audio quality, their servers are going to have to be, 4 times the size of something like Spotify, right?
Yeah, that's true, and yeah, it's definitely true. However, I mean, in the past just couple of years, the hard drive space just keeps getting smaller. Data just keeps getting added to plans. Like, 10 years ago, having a phone that can do internet for 80 gigs a month for like $50 or $60 or something like that would just be impossible. You were paying double that to get that on the internet at your home. Now it's going to the point where at home it's just unlimited. Have as much as you need to. We don't care. With speeds that are like 40 or 50 times faster than they were 5 years ago, and with 5G and like the phone things, it's soon in Peru, it's already like that. Canada is just a weird example with that. But in Peru, people already have unlimited Wi-Fi, unlimited internet on their phones.
Pretty much everywhere in the world is like that, man. Canada has some of the worst data programs for phones. It's it's just a weird quirk of our country that we pay like so I've recently changed my cell phone plan, like because I like kind of took a break from doing so much production work, so I don't have to have my phone on me 24/7 and be like using mobile hotspots all the time and stuff in like farmers fields putting on shows. Like I was paying like over $100 like just for my data. And like it's crazy, but like when I've done shows overseas, it's like, yeah, here's your data plan, give us $5 and go on the internet.
Yeah, it's nuts, which kind of reminds me that I should look into
changing your data plan. Yeah, man, do it. Streaming though, like I think streaming, like can't see streaming going away. Like I think streaming is just, it's here to stay. I can't see the consumers changing the way they ingest music.
Oh yeah, for sure. Even with vinyl and like the revival and all that stuff, it's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, it's more of a boutique thing. But people are on the move and they want to be able to access their files, as soon as they can. So, but I think the problem with royalties is at least with a place like Spotify, is that the shares are like the holders are the labels as well. So they're double or triple dipping on the amount of money that goes to them, So they're sure they invest in the artists they have and everything. I don't have anything against big labels because sometimes I work with them as well, and I have friends that run them as well, But they know that the system is not really set up fairly for the artist yet, and they just have to take advantage as much as they can for as long as they can. But that timeline is, I think, getting close to the end because it's not sustainable for newer artists to come out and to be able to make a living from that,
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe
and make a sustainable living. That's the other thing too, because like these, it's just like such a short career sometimes. A lot of the time, like on like major labels and stuff. Like the major label is great because you can get like a bunch of popularity, and then you peak, you make them a bunch of money, and then you're just kind of like left out. And then now you have the bonus of being able to play like a show for like 500 people that you can maybe book yourself in some markets, right? Like, so like I don't want to like, I never like say like, oh, we got to get rid of like big markets and big labels and Ticketmaster and Live Nation and big promoters and all that shit. Like, but like we gotta curb them a little bit. Like there has to be like some kind of competition and ways for not only musicians but like anyone in the music industry. Like coming up, like I've been pretty fortunate. I've kind of came up before the whole like monopoly on live events. So I got into and built up my client base like before that happened. So I didn't need to use these bigger companies to make my career happen. But it would be nice to like with my other clients, like, to do some of the bigger stuff that they're doing, like, and it would make it a lot easier. And, if I went with like one of those bigger companies, like I wouldn't have made the money I made and been able to, invest my time and money to be able to do what I'm doing. Like I would have just been making really shit money, working shows for a big company.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, maybe it's just new labels, smaller labels being made, and more alternative venues being like starting out. I think like Dan Mangan did a great thing with Side Door, for example. Getting bands to play in houses. And like there's different alternatives and ways to make it work, and that are outside of the system, and they don't have to break the system in order to happen. Something
I feel bad. I kind of shit on them like on a post I made the other day. And I kind of feel bad about it, but I kind of don't. I just like I just want them to do better.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
I think like it's just just the way it operates, like just for selling tickets, and it's taking 10% off it is like it's a lot, and like plus charging a processing fee is a lot. Like I like that number can definitely come down, because like really, especially with like web-based stuff and like e-commerce, once you set it up, it's done. Like the major cost is getting it all set up, and then like keeping it going, and security and like that kind of stuff. It's much lower moving on. And I just think people need to be educated on how, like, it's super easy to like go like Brown Paper Tickets, for instance. They have like a they claim to have like the lowest ticketing fees, and I think they do. I could be wrong. There could be some company out there that almost makes nothing on tickets, but I think Brown Paper Tickets is the lowest, and you can set it up super easy, and it's like as easy as doing one of like these sites like you're talking about. And there's a few other ones that I've seen that do this like kind of like intimate small venue kind of connecting artists and small venues thing. There's like I think I've seen 3 or 4 of them pop up, but like if you're doing that and you're putting in the work to just even set up that page on the website, set up the page on something that's going to cost the band less money, and just put it out on your socials that you're touring this area. You want to play a house show in X city, Y city, and Z city. And then, your fans are the ones that are going to go to those shows, and they'll sure as shit want to host them. And, if it's super easy to set up. Like I just don't think that's the way forward. I saw it was like all over South by Southwest. Like it was like all these things. It was like, this is like the newest craze. But it's like, you got to do that yourself too, because like it's the same. It's just on a smaller scale.
Right. Yeah. I guess what I meant more is that there's a space for different ideas, and just like Side Door or better options that do things properly. Again, same thing with Spotify, and then Tidal, and then it's still such a small percentage that someone with the adequate knowledge on programming and all, and then you need marketing people and all that stuff as well to make it happen, because you could have the best app in the world, but no one ever heard about it, or the graphical user interface was just not pretty enough or easy enough. Like there's so many factors, but something's going to come out and it's going to be better for the artist. And then once that happens, you need like a bigger artist to sort of endorse it, and then from there just keep going.
Do you think like marketing and stuff, it's so funny because you're marketing on these programs that like all of the other people are marketing on, and it's just like there's only so much space for advertisements and marketing, and like it's just it's I don't envy the people who do that, because it just seems like such a it's like it seems like you're just like shouting out into space, sometimes.
It's a weird science for sure, and I understand very little of it, but like I remember I have a friend in Peru that plays in a band with me, and used to play in a band with me, and he now has a company that has like different restaurants and whatnot. And one time we're going to a show just now that I was there visiting, and he was on the phone with someone they had hired that knew all the different percentages of probabilities of how many people would come to the restaurant if they used this font instead of this other font and whatnot. And I was like thinking like, that's crazy. Like how how people would react and what kind of emotion it would, and a lot of that stuff is automated now, with facial recognition, and I don't know, it's just so much stuff. But again, the doors are open there, and just because one thing doesn't become the best thing in the world or the most known doesn't mean that it won't be successful. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with bands. Not everyone's going to be, Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber or whatever. I'm not, insert whatever big time producer you want in here, but I've been able so far to have a comfortable life and to do what I love and to have something to eat and clothes to put on my daughters and everything. So, I consider that to be successful as well. And it doesn't mean that you didn't reach the top like even if I died tomorrow, I wouldn't feel like I missed out on stuff, So everything is scalable, and the best of the best are only going to be such like a less than 1% of the population that, just do the thing that you love. And if it works out, great. And maybe that app is known by 1,000 people, and those 1,000 people, give enough support that it works out as another form of income, and when it comes to bands, actually, because we were talking about that, I still think that merch is king, like
sorry,
apart from CDs and everything.
Oh, merch.
Yeah. Like have a t-shirt that is awesome, not because it has the name of your band, but because the design is so cool that people want to have that shirt, and you'll be making more money than you would with just selling CDs, and that helps making other records and whatnot,
Yeah, merchandise is like a huge part. Like especially now as a band, if your merch isn't on point, like what's the point of even touring? Like if you're not selling merch, you're losing out on a huge piece of revenue. And merch, like there's so many cool things you can do with merch, man. Like you can get you can get shirts like this printed off for like $3 or $4 a piece if you print out a bunch of them, and then bring this shirt on tour with you. But on your website or your whatever, put on like some like limited edition shit, and you can charge a bit more for that, or you can get this shirt for $20, but you can get this shirt for $30, and you can do all sorts of limited stuff, and there's just so many options. But merch is huge part of things. And when I was I was managing for like this much time, I was approached by this management company, and they wanted me to come on board and kind of do some A&R for them. So I was like, I can like get these. I'm heavily involved in like the Toronto indie scene. I can like, pick my faves and like start, working with them and start building. And it just turned out that this management company wasn't all they were selling. They like I kind of got duped, and
Mhm.
the bands I brought in kind of got duped. So it was a real shame. But one of the bands that I did bring into that fold, and luckily like got them out, but was the Mono Whales. And I first saw the Mono Whales at this little show. Where was it? It was at that pinball place on like Dundas West. Uh,
Yeah, I know which
I
one
can't
you're
remember
referring
the
to. I can't remember the
name of it
name.
right now. It's been so long since I've been there. But they were in there, and they played a killer show. Fat as Fuck played with them too, and like they're awesome.
Mhm.
So like the show was great, but what set them apart from, like, I've seen a bunch of good shows, but what set them apart, they had this merch table, and not only did they have like killer merch, like they had like I got the one thing right here. It's a Mono Whales bang, like kind of stash cup, and you can open it up, and they had like all sorts of shit in there. They had like some candy, and they had like a digital download file and stuff, and like I bought that with the vinyl album as a package. But like beyond the cool shit they had to sell, the merch table was also set up like a storefront, like they had their banner
Mhm.
behind them, they had lights on the table, it was all put together nicely. And like those guys pump merch out. Like I've seen it. I've seen them do like a sellout show at the Horseshoe, and the merch just goes out the door, and they do really well
That's
at it.
great.
It's great.
Oh yeah, that's how you afford making another record.
Yep.
If you're an independent artist and you're not getting any advances from the label because you don't have a label, then that's a way of not having to, bartend or do something that's not necessarily related to music just to be able to save some money or try to apply for grants and feeling frustrated by not getting in,
Yeah.
Um, but so this is some piece of advice for artists that are even less like they're not even gigging yet, because I used to teach for a couple of years here in Toronto, and there were a lot of producers, but also bands that were like new in town, and they were like, "Where should we play?" And a lot of them were were considering playing in some of those like pay for play,
Yeah.
schemes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And to a lot of them, I said, why don't you just the 4 bands that are here. Go to a venue, book it, and make the show, and you're going to make a better percentage than if you go with one of these companies, And what I was sort of promoting to them was that that lateral growth is a better way of working. Like for example, in my case as an engineer, when I came here, even though I had done a lot of stuff in Peru and in Banff, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to reach a big artist and be like, "Hey, guys, I want to work with you."
Yeah.
I've done all this other stuff. They don't care. So what I was going to do is find bands that were sort of at the same level that I was, where sure they were going to be able to pay less, but maybe they had this great sound, and I was going to work for them for almost nothing at first or whatever. Don't do that too long though, but have lateral growth. Like if you start working with people that are your same level, and as they grow, you're also growing with them until eventually you're at the same level as the ones. Like no one's going to pull you up, I guess is my point. Like that's very rare. It happens so seldomly that it's better to create your own scene in a way. There's no like guard keeping or anything like that happening. It's just that people just like working with the people that they grew up with in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too. Like another thing is like, you say like no one's gonna pull you up, and like that's very true. But like like it's, you have to also recognize your relationships and like how somebody can help you and your relationship with them, and using that relationship to your advantage, and also while providing that person with something, and like I found like there's like I've learned so much from so many different people. Like I've had like a few like real mentors in my life that have kind of like pulled me up, and like those people to me really stand out. But there's so many people who come by, and like even like just this conversation, like I've learned a lot from you, and you know, I take that, and you know, your circle is like how you're gonna move forward, you know. And so if you have people who are working hard in your circle, you know, it's gonna have a better chance of success, you know. But if you have people that are pulling you down, that's what you really have to worry about, you know.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I guess I meant it more like in the case of an engineer or a studio or you know, a producer, you can have mentors, but that's most likely going to be another engineer or producer, not a band that you know that is letting you record them or produce them or something like that. Because for sure, mentors are the way to go. I'm incredibly lucky to have had a couple of them, and they were both instrumental in what I did, in where I am as well, and like everything. Nothing would have happened. It would have happened in a different way, but the way the things happened because both of them were in my life, you know? So for sure, look for a mentor and learn from them. And you can also learn from people that are less experienced than you and as experienced as you. But I guess what I meant is like, it's the same thing with the gear. Like, because you don't have the gear doesn't mean that you can't get good things going, you know? So same thing, like don't feel desperate because you're not doing the bands that you want to be doing, you know? It's like, get it started somehow and get the ball rolling, and then things will happen on their own, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's about it. Is there anything you're working on that you want to talk about? Do you want to maybe talk about your studio and how people can get a hold of you? If you know, how people can check out some of the stuff you've worked on?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last 5 years, I've had a studio at Dundas West in Toronto. I'm now subletting that place to a couple other guys, Nick Boyd and Matt Leverman. Who?
Oh, I know Matt. You guys, yeah, it makes sense. You guys are in the same circle. You guys are both sweetheart audio engineers.
So now he's subletting my studio in Dundas West, and there's also 4 producing rooms that we rent out to other guys as well. That every now and then they open up. So if anyone's looking for a space, let me know. But the space my new studio, the Danforth, is gonna be at 310 Danforth. So that's right next to the Big Carrot. So very close to Broadview, and it's the first time I'm not in a basement. It's on the second floor, and there's a window to the outside. Wow. It's like crazy, with like 12-foot ceilings, and yeah, it's great. I'm really excited for that. It was a pain to make it work because we had some problems with a bit of a scammer investor originally, but all that stuff is in the past.
I read your post about that. That's
yeah. All that stuff is in the past. Now I have an incredible partner, and the studio already has the floating floor, and the walls are almost done. So it should be ready by March. I'm already booking sessions by March, but for now I'm still doing remote mixing, mastering for now, or location. You know, I have traveling stuff as well. And for those that want to check out my work, they can go to pachasound.com. So it's PACHA sound.com. And there's like a little bio and all that stuff, but and a bit of a playlist of the different artists I've worked with. But I mean, most of the time the work I've been getting has been from word of mouth. So this is for anyone that hadn't heard of me yet. That stuff is there, and yeah, I love listening to music, and I love being involved in different ways. And something that I've been enjoying a lot through the pandemic has been working with singer-songwriters that don't have a band, but they have songs. So we record their guitar and their vocals, and then I play drums and bass and guitar and percussion and all that stuff here at home, and then I mix it here as well, and everyone's been incredibly happy, and it's been like such a efficient way of working for both the artist who now doesn't have to leave their house, and for me, who also don't have to leave my house. And yeah, so if anyone also has that in mind, send me an email. My contact information is there, and then we'll chat.
All right, Guillermo. I can't thank you enough for doing this first episode with me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, best of luck to you with the new studio, man. You are like always such a pleasure to be around and talk to, and I wish you nothing but success, man.
Thank you, and likewise. Thanks so much for having me here.
All right, mate. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
You're watching the Hostile Takeover podcast.